A book that had a huge impact at its inception and is still gaining cultural relevance 2 decades later. Welcome everyone to another round of the Mere Mortals book reviews. My name is Kyron and I do these book reviews for those who want to transcend beyond their own mere mortality, to dive deeper into the books that they're investigating, to get those sweet, tasty reviews, the juices, all of the meat that you can find within these books. And today it is a fun one. We are definitely diving deep into something, and not just in the physical sense, but in the metaphysical sense. We have Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson. So this book was published in 1992, was originated, as all good things are, prime example being me. And this is a 470-page book, so it's a fairly hefty one. And like I said, it is gaining cultural relevance with the idea of the Metaverse, which was one of the big things that was promoted in this book. It's a dystopian USA where technology is way more advanced, but life is significantly deeper, darker, and harder. So the book basically centers around this guy, a hero called Hiro. So you know he's the good guy because his name is literally Hiro Protagonist, and a girl called Y.T. And so basically they are trying to save the world from this company/man that is trying to infect a virus to spread out to everyone and essentially control their minds in a way. So it is a somewhat sci-fi type of book because they have lots of things related to technology. So this is, things like VR, things like the Metaverse, which I'll get onto shortly. There are all sorts of tech that is really, really cool. But it's also got this weird sense where people are, much more aggressive to each other. There's violence everywhere. And they have to go through their physical world in the USA to go onto this big raft and essentially stop the madman, the person taking over and spreading this virus to everyone. And they also have to fight in the metaverse, in this sort of constructed reality that has been made. So the book itself and the author Neal Stephenson are pretty fascinating. The inception of it, I guess, was meant to be as a graphic novel. So he had originally planned this with an artist, and they were going to make this book a sort of comic book type style thing, and doing this on the actual computers. Now, remember, this was birthed in 1992, so computers weren't super good back then. The internet wasn't around, and they were trying to create this thing and basically couldn't get it created in the manner that they wanted, and so he just wrote a book instead. And this is just a deep dive into Neal Stephenson's, I guess, preoccupations, the things that he loves, because in this book you'll find history, linguistics, anthropology, archaeology, religion, computer science, politics, cryptography, memetics, and philosophy. So says on the Wikipedia page. And it is true because all of these things are contained within the book. It has cultural relevance because of the things that it births. So one is he coined avatar. So this is saying the physical body, I guess, the constructed reality of a body in the whatever it is, in the game or in the metaverse or wherever, that is going to be called an avatar. And he was, if not the guy who coined it, he was sort of the one who popularized that term. Distributed republic, so this is ideas that the USA is not one country anymore, and it's split into these little franchises everywhere. So you would have the mafia, then you would have I think it was NG's Hong Kong, these small little republics, and all of these different areas where you're safe in this area because it's guarded by the rat things or by people or however you want to look at it. So the book has just many different aspects, and we'll get onto the main theme now, which is the Metaverse. So there's a very culturally relevant one with Facebook changing its name to Meta in honor of the Metaverse. So the Metaverse, is it better than reality? And what is it? So in the book, we're treated to this world where people will put on these headsets, VR headsets essentially, and go into the metaverse. And so this is a online technological world where people can go in, and it has things like the street, which is a big 100-meter wide road where people can walk up and down on it, and there is just shops and buildings and apartments and all sort of stuff on the side of the street, and then it, believe branches down into other sort of sub networks and smaller streets and things like that. But there's this one street that just goes across the whole globe, and so they've created a perfect spherical world. There was a bunch of numbers related to it because they're all sort of geeky, and so everything is in bits and bytes. So 2 to the power of 2 to the power of 8, so 256. These sorts of numbers have a special relevance for the people in the metaverse and for hackers, which is what Hiro, the main character of the book, is. So they have this. He was the one who helped construct this world, and so he has somewhat powers in this world because he can hack, he can create code, he can do all sorts of things. But there's the street, so this main one, there's a monorail that goes around it very, very rapidly. So this is a way of being able to transport yourself within this constructed world. There's a lot of inequality because people getting into the metaverse have to sort of hook in with like a fiber optic cable, basically. And so not that many people in the world have access to fiber optics in this world. So it's sort of the rich people, and then of the rich people, there are even richer people who have the money to spend for good avatars, for a good connection, to get access into the Black Sun, which is sort of the most exclusive hacker place in the metaverse, and all sorts of things like that. It's somewhat blocky and weird. It's not super fleshed out. It definitely doesn't make the claim to be like reality. It's its own thing. People can create avatars to look like whatever they want to look like. They can do all sorts of things. And I would also say it's not super fleshed out. It's not really stated specifically like people go in it to do trade or for entertainment, or it seems to they go in for more entertainment / educational purposes to be able to create connections and do things that you can't do in reality. And the reason for this is it's sort of bad. The real life reality is not so good. So that's the idea of the metaverse in the book. And I want to compare it to the perception maybe of what the metaverse will be nowadays, because it seems to have gained so much cultural relevance. People are talking about it a lot. And when I think of what it will be nowadays, or what maybe it being constructed in our reality, not in the snow crash reality, it seems to be a lot more focused on games. So like the gaming aspect, the design, the architectural design, owning your own piece of land, the crypto money and sort of cryptocurrencies seems to be a large part of that. So it's sort of the trading aspect, the financial aspect. There's the social media portion, the fame, the status points, the VR aspect. So there's the actual technology and FOMO as well, which seems to be one of the big ones. It's like, I need to get in right now, otherwise I'm going to miss out on owning a piece of land or being one of the first people into the metaverse. So I was trying to think, is there much of a difference between what is being constructed now and what was constructed in this book? I felt that there was, but I can't really articulate what it is, because it seemed to me the metaverse now is more just like a cool, fashionable thing. And then I want to say, it wasn't that in the book, but there was aspects of it as well. So yeah, maybe it does line up a bit more than what my initial reaction was with the comparison of the two. I guess the question gets to be, will we use it in the sense that it was being used in the book, which was people would use it because it was better than reality. Their reality somewhat sucked. They were, poor, or it was dangerous out in the real world. Whereas you could get cut up by swords and stuff in the metaverse, and you just lose your avatar. You can't log back in for an hour or two, and then once your sort of avatar has been cremated in the dungeons, the underworld of the metaverse, then you could sort of get back in. And then I guess, compare it to now. Well, are people getting into the metaverse because it's better than our current reality? I wouldn't particularly say that. It's more because it's like a fun, interesting thing. Will that continue though? Would people still be spending their whole lives somewhat in the metaverse, like some people in the book do, which they call gargoyles. So even when they're walking around in reality, they're somewhat tuned in because they still have aspects of the metaverse where they can get digital information appearing rapidly on their goggles and have, a camera constantly viewing all the time every interaction that they're having and the going-ons and whatnot. So I think that might be one distinguishing point, that in the book, the metaverse was this sort of cool place, but you'd get it to escape. Whereas, I don't know, I hope nowadays that people wouldn't be going into the metaverse to escape, more to add to their sort of lives that we have now. But, who knows? The other theme that I really wanted to bring up was language, the core of communication. And this one actually really surprised me because I thought this book would be a sort of sci-fi techno book, adventure. There's a hero called Hiro, and it would sort of be, I guess, somewhat one-dimensional in a way. It's like, hey, look at this cool, crazy tech of how the world could be. But as I mentioned right at the start, there was all of these other aspects with anthropology, archaeology, religion, etc., etc. And the one that really interests me is language, because I'm just sort of fascinated by languages anyway. And in the book, there was the virus. So I didn't particularly explain what the virus was. And there was two aspects to it. There was the biological snow crash. So this was a drug that people could take. And after taking it, they would sort of begin to speak in tongues. They would sort of seem to lose their grip on reality a little bit and would start behaving oddly and bizarrely, almost in a religious type of manner. And they would sort of find the talking of languages and the religious feeling to become all-consuming in a way. So there was the biological, and then there was the digital version. And this one was one where the name of the book comes from, Snow Crash, where if the screen of your computer or your device or your VR goggles or whatever it was sort of blanked out or had a fit, you would see Snow Crash, which was just what would look like the black and white pixelated screen where it's sort of fuzzy and whatnot. And if someone was a programmer, they would look at this and they would be infected by the virus as well through the digital bits would enter through their optic nerve, get into their brain, and then they would behave as if they had taken the physical drug. So it was very dangerous for coders. And I guess one of the core aspects of the book was looking at, okay, why are they different? Why would someone who has a sort of different mind, a different capability, a different way of thinking, i.e. hackers and programmers and coders, why would they then be influenced by this digital screen, whereas a normal person could look at the same thing and not experience that same effect from the virus? And this is where it gets into the questions of hardware versus software. So it sort of was laid out like this in the book. You have you're born and you have the human brain, and this is the hardware. So this is the physical linkages and connections and whatnot, the structure, I guess, of something of the brain. You will then learn your language. So this could be English, it could be Swahili, it could be whatever language it is in the world that you want to insert. And this would be the software almost. So you've got the hardware, and then it's like, here's some language, we're going to push it into that, and it will reside in here. And this is the thing that actually allows you to use the hardware to be able to communicate, to speak, to do all of these different things. And then the book was essentially asking, okay, but is language software? So is it actually a program, just the ordered bits that goes into the hardware? Is language this, or is language somewhat in the hardware itself? And so this is actually relates to a real life question of universalists versus relativists. So I'm going to jump to page 276 in the book because it somewhat explains this. And of course, the name Chomsky appears because he is definitely one of the sort of premier linguists of the 20th century. And there was a lot of he had a lot of interesting ideas and aspects, and influenced, I guess, how people think about languages. And so I'm going to jump into here. So there was these two aspects, the universalist and realist, and the relativist. So yes, therefore, according to the universalists, French and English or any other languages must share certain traits that have their roots in the deep structures of the human brain. According to Chomskyan theory, the deep structures are innate components of the brain that enable it to carry out certain formal kinds of operations on strings of symbols, so et cetera, et cetera. Then the universalists are saying, okay, there is something so deep inside that just can't. That it's so deep inside the hardware that it is the hardware itself. Like language is the hardware, and it's not the bits and bobs that go in. That is sort of an aspect of it. Yes, there are some differences between languages, but the core theme of language is so deep within us that it's going to appear anyway. And so this is why the virus, I guess, could potentially spread to everyone. But then there was the other aspect, which is like, no. It's relative, because the programming, the snow crash, the biological virus is only affecting programmers. So these are people who think differently. So they have software which almost has a bug in it in some way. And then this is why the snow crash drug can come in and through the optic nerve and mess them up. So I just found the whole debate on those two sides was quite fascinating, and I didn't expect it within the book itself. And then it got me thinking: is coding actually a language? I'm not a linguist, so I can't tell, but I would say probably yes. If you're able to think in a different way and communicate, even though it's digitally, and you're not particularly doing it with another person, you're not typing in C# code to another person to talk. There's usually a goal or an aim in mind. I do imagine that if you spend enough time coding and thinking of how to structure things so you can get your computer to do whatever, or your phone to do this, and have this pop up and then this action occur when this thing does, I imagine that would somewhat be a different aspect of language and being able to communicate. It's not exactly the same as the classical languages of English, Spanish, and Russian and things like that, but it is a language in a way, just not used for the purpose of communication with another person. It's almost like communication with the metaverse, with the code itself. So I'm going to jump into some observations and takeaways. Are there downsides to learning languages? This book actually got me thinking about that, because I'd always sort of assumed, not particularly. Yes, you have to put in tons of work and things like that, but would learning another language actually become a detriment at some point, because you could be infected by a virus? The book is kind of funny in that sense, but maybe it is possible. Maybe if there was a certain way to order information, that everyone who spoke German would behave in a certain manner and have no capability of stopping how they're, if they had the conscious choice, they wouldn't be able, they would say, no, I don't want to do that, but they just get infected. Probably not, but still it's a intriguing idea. And there's lots of other things, benefits to learning languages, being able to communicate with more people, helps in later life to keep your brain sharp. I think it reduces your chances of getting Alzheimer's or dementia and things like that. But yeah, maybe I should actually look out for some ways where having another language, learning another language, could be a detriment. There was lots of little touches in this book as well. So as you're going through, you'll see Neal Stephenson really thought about how it would actually be like to use the metaverse. So yes, you dive into this place and you've got your VR goggles on, but he got surprised. For example, Hiro, the protagonist, Hiro Protagonist, got surprised when a daemon, I believe that's how you say it, Daemon, came in called the librarian, and it came in too silently, and so it sort of scared him because it was like, oh shit, like you just appeared right there. And so then he has to ask this digital code, this program, to be like, hey, can you make some noise when you come in next time so you don't scare me? There's things like the ghost avatars. So if there's too many people, you can't have everyone physically bumping into each other, and you can't see on the street. So people will sort of turn into this ghostly shimmering thing. You'll still be a solid looking thing, but you can then move through people and actually interact in the world. You can have the height restriction, so people aren't allowed to be, a mile tall. They all have to have an avatar which is in the sort of somewhat, normal human height range. The face rendering, there's all sorts of things where I was like, man, he must have spent a lot of time really thinking about how this metaverse would actually work, and it wasn't just this would be a cool sort of thing. He actually practically thought about, if this technology was real, what would be the problems? What things would come up? And I really did appreciate that in the book. And funnily enough, the only thing I really wish was it was longer. So there was plenty of things happening in the book, and I sort of came to the end and was like, God damn, man, if this was an extra 100, 200 pages, that would have been good. I wanted to know more about their interactions, like what the raft is, what would happen to the virus once they somewhat stopped it. And there was all sorts of cool things and interesting, fun characters like Enzo, the boss of the mafia, and all these sorts of things where I was like, damn, that's very cool. Another point, and this is from page 271, which just got me thinking, it was moments like this which I was like, damn, he really knows his audience. So this is the start of chapter 36, and it says, until a man is 25, he still thinks every so often that under the right circumstances, he could be the baddest motherfucker in the world. If I moved to a martial arts monastery in China and studied real hard for 10 years, if my family was wiped out by Colombian drug dealers and I swore myself to revenge, if I got a fatal disease and had 1 year to live, devoted it to wiping out street crime, if I just dropped out and devoted my life to being bad. That's so true. There's got to be, every guy has got to imagine that at some point of, playing fantasies in their head of how they could be the coolest or the best or whatnot. And, I've had those exact ones thinking, oh man, if I just went to a monastery and got real good at martial arts, that would be the cool. Or, if everything I loved got wiped out, I had no strings or attachments in this world, I'd be able to do these things because I just wouldn't give a fuck. Like all of this funny stuff. So there was moments like that in the book, which just really, really made me appreciate it. So in summary, if you like sci-fi and dystopian tales, this book is a very solid read. I do have a fondness for dystopian type ones myself. So that's an explanation of why I quite enjoyed it. I read it, I wanted it for the cultural relevance, but was actually more intrigued by the linguistic stuff. So I did read it to understand what the metaverse was or his idea of it. But what I really enjoyed more was the other parts of the book, the linguist, the idea of languages and programming, coding was, I found it really, really fascinating. It's a rather simple story in some ways. It's about a hero called Hiro. The plot line is not super complex. You can sort of tell that the characters, what they're going to do from the start. This is the good guy, this is the bad guy, this is how they'll largely behave. But I didn't think this was I thought it was like a nice casing for all of the cooler ideas. So there's the ideas of language, of the metaverse and whatnot. So I'm glad that the storyline itself was, for me, seemed rather simple, a straightforward narrative and tale. But the world he created was the really interesting aspects, and it got to showcase that. So overall, I'm going to give Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson a 7.5 out of 10. A decent book, and definitely worth reading if you want to gain up some cultural relevance of what is the metaverse and things like that. So thank you, everyone, for joining me to this part of the video. Have you read the book Snow Crash? What are your thoughts on the metaverse? And even more importantly, what did you think of the language and linguistic aspect of the book? I'd love to know those things. So if you want to do that, please just leave a comment below. If you can do all the nice things like subscribe, share, All of that helps me out. And I really do hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the metaverse. Karen out.